Hey everyone, this is Jen and you're watching BPD Woman. On this channel, you will learn how to more effectively live with your borderline personality disorder or your complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or you will find skills on this channel if you find that you are a highly sensitive person and have trouble managing your emotions. My aim is to share my experience, insight, wisdom, so that you may achieve the goals that are important in your life, whether that's money or relationships or more emotional stability. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder over 20 years ago, although I'm probably pretty certain I've lived with it for about 30 years. In that time, I have attended multiple rounds of DBT, group therapy, in-person one-on-one counseling. I have books, workbooks, I've done the research. I have a YouTube channel. You get it, I'm pretty committed. And even though I'm not a counselor or a therapist or a psychologist, I can answer one question that most of those folks cannot, which is, what is it like to live with borderline personality disorder? And while it is important to seek out professionals, it's very important to enroll in DBT and to get the appropriate kind of professional help. My aim is to offer you insights, not only with that realm of knowledge, but also what I know is that how you actually live with it day to day. So my experience isn't based on theory, it's based on real world experience. So I produce about 3 to 5 videos each week, always something new or different. I also take video requests, and that's going to be this video today. So if that all sounds good to you, please hit subscribe and the bell below so you never miss a beat. As I mentioned, I produce anywhere from 3 to 5 videos each week. So as I mentioned, I have a video request from a viewer living in the UK, and I'm so sorry if I'm about to mispronounce your name. I believe it's pronounced Iwa. Or Ia. Please drop me a line and tell me how to phonetically pronounce that correctly, so I'm doing you justice. But she was sharing with me some experiences in a video comment about her relationship with therapy, and she asked if I could share my experience with therapy. And so that's what I want to do today. I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of therapy. And I'm going to also offer some tips on what to look for in therapy. I've done a similar video several months ago, and I'll put a link up. Basically, I explain what to look for when you're searching for a effective DBT class, or what you look for in a professional counselor or therapist. So let's get started. As I mentioned, I was diagnosed about 20 years ago, and probably beginning about 30 years ago, my mother, who I'm now estranged from, began placing me into psychiatric hospitals and mental health wards. And I have, just kind of like in a nutshell, the kind of experience therapy-wise I've had really does run the gamut. I've attended, 30-day living, 12-step programs. I have done group therapy. I have done one-on-one therapy. I have done probably about 5 to 6 rounds of complete dialectical behavior therapy, which is the modality for those diagnosed with BPD. I have done workbooks. I have done trauma-related kinds of therapy. And I have also been hospitalized at different points of my life for either suicidal ideation or being detained against my will because I was making a threat to harm myself. So, and so the last time probably I was hospitalized was a long time ago now. Probably 8 years ago, a really long time ago. So the last time, I've done DBT several times throughout my life. Probably the last time that I did a complete full workup of DBT was in 2014-15, and then I did like an amended I take that back. The last time I did a DBT course was about 2017. So generally about every 3 years I had done a DBT class. And my one-on-one therapy, the last time that I was doing one-on-one therapy was kind of the beginning of the pandemic. So we're talking like late fall of 2019. She was a relatively new therapist to me at that point. And after getting to know her a while, well, we're going to talk about that. But needless to say, I stopped going to therapy. So now I'd like to kind of delve this into some subsections. Okay. One of the first things that I absolutely recommend is getting a specialist in whatever traumatic thing you're living with or that you're trying to cope from. So if you are trying to cope from post-traumatic stress, seek out someone who specializes in trauma. If you are dealing with borderline personality disorder, please seek out someone that is highly knowledgeable and only focuses in on personality disorders, and especially go a step further and look for someone who's trained in DBT. Now, depending on where you live, that may be a taller order, but that is, listen, if you had a heart-related issue, would you go to a dentist or would you go to a cardiologist? You would go to the specialist, you'd go to the cardiologist. So the same is for your mental health. You need to find that specialist. Now, if you can't, that's okay. It's just been my personal experience that, people like providers, therapists will, they'll write like, what are your, you'll look at a snapshot, like, what are your specialties that you offer? And it's like depression, alcoholism, eating disorders, personality disorders. And then, and I'll talk to some of these folks and I'll be like, great, like, what do you know about DBT? And they're like, what? So it's like they're just clicking off buttons to make themselves look more attractive on paper or online to get potential clients in the door. So I will say that I've definitely come up against in my therapy situations where I've had really competent providers that I've been able to, get some work on. I've also had a lot of situations where I've had counselors who I just, they just sat there and sometimes I felt like I was talking to a waxwork. I'm like, are you going to give me anything here? Are you going to say something? I could just talk out loud at home. Like I don't have to drive 30 minutes and spend $50 every time I come here. Right. So, but let me talk first about like the really positive things that have come out of my therapy as a whole. First of all, DBT absolutely changed my life. I don't mean that like in some, I do mean that, obviously I'm not a completely different person, but I am a very much changed person from the person I was even 5, 10, 20 years ago. These skills, like once I was diagnosed back in 2001, once I was diagnosed with BPD, I was like, okay, now I know what I'm working with. And then I still had years of kind of trying to like, fight against, well, I'll figure it out on my own. Well, I have these books, like I'll read the books, and it is good, like read the books. I have another video about, resources and tools I recommend for BPD, knowledgeable, right? Like you want to choose positive, informed, knowledgeable sources. You want to stay off of platforms that have emotional language. You want to stay off of platforms that are not moderated or reviewed by a doctor. Like, right? You don't want to go to Reddit and just like listen to some, ex-boyfriend who's on a bender about what a bitch his ex-girlfriend with BPD is. I don't have time for that. Cancel. So, So what those skills though and that diagnosis gave me were like, oh, okay. Because not only are you learning the skills, but you're also by nature of learning what you, forgive the term, should be doing, or what is more effective in practice. I was also learning about the things that I was doing that were maladaptive in place, right? And so it didn't get it the first time of DBT, and I didn't get the second time. I would say probably about the third time, I really began to understand these skills and practice them. And I say this often in my videos, there are no overnight remedies. Your disorder or your trauma you've lived with for decades, and so it's going to take maybe just as long to unfurl and unpack all of that, given that you put in the work, right? It just doesn't, like, if you stop with your traumatic environment at 20, by 40, it's just not going to go away. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, tears. So be prepared. No easy fixes, no short-term fixes, and it's a lot of hard work, which also means it's a lot of money. So I've managed along the way. But DBT, while incredibly exhausting, sometimes the therapy is just as exhausting as actually living with a disorder, really began to change my life. And it wasn't overnight, and I still lost friendships, and I still burned bridges, and I still had blow-ups, and I still sent shitty text messages along the way. However, I was able, I would honestly say by my late 30s, okay, so this is probably about 10 years of on and off intensive DBT training and skills work and one-on-one counseling, I was able to really begin to implement these skills. And then I would say now, in my early 40s, I use them without thinking about them too much, which means they've kind of become second nature. And if that sounds like a long time and it's scary, well, it is. It's a long time and it's scary, right? I mean, I remember being like 25 and thinking, okay, well, as long as all of these things that I do related to borderline go away by 30, I'll be okay, And then by 30, I was like, okay, well, as long as by 35, right? If they all go away, I'll be fine. And then by 40, I was like, okay, look, I'm 40, I'm doing the best I fucking can, right? Like, that's, you just have to kind of do the best you can. And I mean, that's all you can honestly expect out of anyone at any given time in any situation. So, it did give me those skills. And I would say also that in using those resources that I recommended in my other video and working on workbooks and doing the homework at home and writing it out really did help me put those things into practice. So you can't put the textbook under your bed at night and then hopefully you absorb it through your brain. It doesn't work like that, okay? So another positive thing that came out of my DBT coursework was the one-on-one coaching. So if you do true DBT counseling in the whole group, you do the 4 modules, which is about 24 weeks of group sessions. So it's about, it's twice a week, the class meets for 90 minutes. And then you also, in that week, you have a one-on-one session with a counselor. That's a 60-minute session. And then throughout the week, you're also, and this is true DBT, you also get phone coaching. And so phone coaching could be done like through a crisis point, like, I'm scared, I think I'm gonna be, fired at work. And then like, you call your DBT psychologist or they call you and then you have a coaching session, right? And so those types of things are intensive, but like, and you may find other counselors that will be willing to text with you or call you when it's not really technically your session. DBT isn't really like that. DBT is sort of like almost to a point on call all the time, where like, a regular one-on-one, just like licensed social worker or counselor, it's like, okay, you see them for your 50 minutes every week and then that's it. So having that one-on-one was also helpful because in that moment I was able to see maybe what I was thinking wasn't effective or what I could be doing that would be more effective, or having someone turn the lens on, this is what the situation looks like to me and you're being really dysregulated. You don't get that on one-on-one regular therapy because whatever happens to you on a Wednesday you may not talk about until the following Monday, right? And then you've kind of lost the momentum of what was going on. Like you need to try to solve it in that moment. And so that's why I really recommend DBT, true DBT, and why I really recommend that sort of intensive therapy. Now, I've also been able at times to make friends with some people in therapy, like the DBT classes or the group therapy. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I also and it's good to have support, right? And it's good to have someone that knows what you're going through. But there's a caveat. And the caveat is that these folks that you're in groups with, they are just in the same place as you are emotionally speaking, and they might not be very healthy for you in certain realms, right? So I found that with some of my friendships, there were things that we could throw off of each other or bounce off, or we could, we could understand, like, oh yeah, you obsess about not getting a text, I obsess about not getting a text back, right? There were shared sort of traumas like that. But then, if I wanted to, so I felt like they knew what I was going through, but let's say like I wanted some positive reinforcement, or I needed a view that wasn't seen through the BPD lens. That's when those types of relationships had their limits. And especially if you're like me, sometimes you have this propensity to get involved with people very quickly. You can get wrapped up also very quickly in sort of this negative or toxic one-on-one relationship with someone who also has BPD. So what I'm saying is, use your gray area. Think of them as supports. Think of them as, comrades who understand what you're going through, but also recognize that they're not going to be able to also give you the most healthy interpretation of an event. They may be dysregulated themselves. They may be going through some of their own issues and not be able to talk to you on the phone when you need them. And so if you're starting to get these inconsistencies with this person, which, is to be expected, right? Because we're all in this DBT group together, then that could become dysregulating in itself. And so that's why I really recommend that you also find friends that are, and I'm sure you already have them, that are not in therapy or in DBT, right? That you have some friends that are in that kind of real world that you can use these skills off of them and see how they work. So that's just a cautionary tale, because it can go toxic, and then, what you consume is what kind of permeates. So if you're consuming a lot of negative energy, then is that really helpful ultimately to whatever your goals are in therapy? Probably not. The other thing that I would like to mention is that therapy can sometimes be negative. Okay, so what do I mean? Well, I mean a few things. First of all, people that generally get into helping professions, so military, cops, psychologists, firefighters, doctors, they do get in it from this like helping point of view. But there are situations where therapists go into therapy and they have a lot of issues or problems themselves. I have met plenty of people like, oh yeah, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and now I give therapy, or they come from like this kind of traumatic background. And again, this is still sort of like this dynamic of being able to have a friend like in DBT class who like, oh, okay, cool, they've experienced this, they know what I'm going through. However, are they the right positive person and in the right state of frame of mind to actually help you through your issues? That's what we're trying to do, right? You're trying to kind of get someone who knows this stuff above you and not is like on the same plane. And I have met many, especially in DBT, DBT can sort of become like a cult. Anything can sort of turn in a cult, when you get all that group thinking going and you're enmeshed and you're like, we must see it this way, we must see it this way. Anything. Religions can become cult, like AA meetings can become cult, like anything like where this group mentality takes over, right? And like no longer are you allowed to sort of have dissenting opinions. I did find that in DBT. And I found that also with therapists who began to become unprofessional and share more of their personal lives than I really think is appropriate. Therapeutic relationships are not friendships, right? Like it's pretty one-sided. I come in, I pay you, you help me, that's it. I'm not here to hear about your life. That's fine. Oh, how's your cat doing? Cool. Oh, how's your kids? Fine. 2 seconds at the beginning of the session. But to me, I don't really see that person as like a person, right? Like you're there to provide a service. Like, this isn't a real friendship, right? Like, I don't ask you about your problems. And beware the therapist who begins to divulge more information that is appropriate, which can be especially problematic in DBT settings, since you are getting to know these people so intimately. I mean, if you are doing true DBT, then with that one psychologist, you're spending 4 to 5 hours with them each week. That's a lot. You know, that's more than I spend with most of my friends. So there becomes, I think, this blurred line where they become too comfortable with you, right? Or like, you know, this delineation between provider and patient becomes skewed. And I have heard about therapists' sexual traumas and their rapes. I mean, I have heard them cry. Like, I mean, I made a therapist cry once, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, she had to go out and compose herself. I was like, this is getting fucked. And that's actually one of the reasons why at the end of my 2 full sessions of DBT, I left this one center, because this woman was just not right herself. And just because someone's a therapist or in some position of perceived power does not mean that they are healthy or right or good at their job. You know, there's good mechanics and bad mechanics, right? You have really great coffee baristas and like really bad coffee baristas. Well, the same is true in professions just like military, cops, providers, and especially in psychology. Not everyone is trustworthy. Not everyone is sane. I mean, you can see this sort of ethically not okay behavior everywhere. So that has affected me, because at times that slowed my growth down, right? Or I felt too enmeshed, or suddenly I felt like now I was addicted to the therapy. That's not the place that you want to be in. You should get what you need in therapy. You should reinforce what you need in therapy, and then you should cut ties. You know, I have spent years and years and years on end, you know, in therapy, and it turns into like a weekly bitch session. And it's like, okay, if we start, you know, I'll give my therapist goals. I'll be like, this is what I want from you. I want to tackle this. I would like to have reading assignments. I would like to have homework. Okay. And you know, maybe they would do that once or twice, and then it would just like devolve into like this weekly bitch session. I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere. This is not working. And so that can slow you down. I have made more progress, and I don't mean to, like, this is true. I've made more progress being sober outside of AA than AA ever gave me. I have made a lot more progress practicing these skills in my real life and doing my workbooks at home than sometimes I got with seeing therapists one-on-one. I'm not saying that you should do all of this at home. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that you do need to think in this gray area, right? You know, sometimes you'll find that they're giving you skills in DBT that they want you to practice, but then they don't actually enforce them, right? So it's like, do as I say and not as I do. Oh, no, right? So therapy and books have really contributed to a level of self-awareness. But most of what you're actually going to do in the recovery sector is out there in the real world. It's practice, right? So therapy is the rehearsal, is the dress rehearsal, and then going out into the real world is the live shot, right? That's like where the work actually happens. You get the skills, you use them. I would say hospitalizations have never really helped me. Save for that one time in 2001 when I got my diagnosis. But again, you know, especially if you're female or if you're young or you're attractive, people can become very predatory in those situations. And I do mean male providers. I have had guys hit on me, male providers hit on me. I have had leering looks, right? And you know, what the fuck is that? You know, you're basically, you know, especially if you've been temporarily detained because you threatened suicide and you're held for 72 hours or a week, and you know, you're waiting to be discharged and you just can't walk out of the door whenever you want. Now you got to deal with like this predatory nature of this guy that's like on the ward in a professional, you know, role that, you know, can access your room anytime they want. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, anything sexual happened. I'm just saying, like, I have definitely had levels of discomfort. And so I've never felt that in my area, in the state I live in, anytime I've been in a hospital, I really have not felt like it's helped. And how could it? You know, I mean, hospitals are like a one-stop shop, like emergency situation, right? Like, okay, let's get that person stable, let's get them some medicine. But like, no true work is gonna happen 3 days in a hospital ward. Give me a break, you know? It takes decades to be where I'm at now. I certainly couldn't have got that at a hospital. But I understand that people get hospitalized to stay safe. I'm just saying that, like, there are dual worlds in therapy, and I don't think that it's wise to look at therapy as like all good or all bad, right? Because it's not all good or all bad. It is a gray zone. I mean, these are just people, they're not robots, like operating these hospitals and therapy sessions. So overall, what I'm trying to say is that along the way, there was this part of where I looked up to the therapist or the hospital or the staff, like, help me, help me, help me. I'm the student, you know more. And then eventually, as I gained more skills, I could say, hey, you know, some of the things you're doing aren't incredibly healthy, or like, this doesn't make any sense, right? And that's actually when I found at that point when I could kind of evolve out of therapy, or when I wasn't getting it anymore. You know, if you're not getting what you need, or if your counselor's not showing up in the way that you need them to show up, don't be afraid to walk away. I mean, I just don't. I mean, there's just not something very healthy about keeping a therapeutic relationship going on for years and years and years. I've been in those situations, and I have, like, been with the same therapists for years and years and years at times. I have not been in a professional relationship like that, at least for a year and a half now. So just beware. Just beware that you're not sticking in therapy too long, that you're actually getting out there and doing these things, because at some point you got to cut those ties and get out there. Now, I'm not saying this if you're in a crisis mode that that's the right thing for you to do, or if you're, you know, if you're on medication and you need to see a psychiatrist. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying be tuned in to these things. Overall, obviously, I recommend therapy. It has made me be able to be where I'm at today, where I'm independent, I'm regulated, I can do my work, I can make my money and live on my own and provide for myself and my animals. You know, that I can have a degree of functionality, a high degree of functionality, that I enjoy life, that I'm not depressed, that I'm not crying all of the time, that I can solve my problems, I now have a greater self-esteem, right? I believe more in myself, and things are going well for me. And so if they're going well for me, I'm positive that they can go well for you, as long as you're willing to put in the work. My name's Jen. You've been watching BPD Woman. Please consider sharing, liking, subscribing, commenting below. And as always, until I speak with you.